You're listening to Big World Network.
Flight from Hell, Episode 1, written and read by Nakir. The sky was a darker shade of red, tinging towards the color of crusted blood. The eye, long used to seeing everything as if through a colored lens, failed to notice that blue had become purple and that green edged towards black. It adjusted even as the mind protested and choked and tried to shift vision back to normality, avid for beauty, tired in never-ending efforts, subject to a constant pressure that tried to bring it down to its knees and turn it towards depression, desperation, and death. In Falkirk, God had not bothered to make the sun and moon. During the day, the sky lit. During the night, light went away except for an unnatural glow that never quite vanished entirely. Few plants grew, and fewer animals roamed. The dwellers fed undead human souls as was the way of the land, or of the entirety of hell, not just this capital of succubi and incubi. Ave mein Angelum. His eyes had been closed, he realized. He had tried to sleep, but even in dreams he could see the world outside. He still gazed upon the plains and the hills, the barren desert filled with stones, upon the rare river, the rare tree, the rare patch of grass. Salve, Sara, he greeted back, looking at his companion. She seemed even more tired than he was, but strong, stronger than him these days, these places. She came deeper inside the shallow cave, dropping to her knees next to him and caressing his shoulder. Whether she loved him or not, he wouldn't know until they escaped Falkirk and left hell far behind them, if they ever did. Until then, there was too little to be had from feelings, too much to be gained from a cold-hearted alliance. It didn't stop her from acting perversely like a lover, snuggling close to his sprawled body as if seeking his warmth and comfort, or trying to offer them. He didn't feel very fond of that now. "I brought food," she said. "It's roasting outside. Nil is watching it." They spoke a tangled web of languages, using whichever came first to the tongue. French for obscurity, accented English for secrecy, some version of Latin with travellers from all over hell, and the Falkirkian Latin-German dialect for everyday needs. Falkirk. He hated even its torturous, difficult name, a trip of the tongue through sudden stops and pained rasps. He could understand all the languages of Earth, but was native to none. She didn't seem to care either way. "Nakir?" she said softly, seeing he didn't answer. "Are you all right?" "Weak." "Again?" But she didn't sound surprised. His strength was ebbing slowly as he tried to resist the tempting, dirtying tendrils of that side of hell, the probing touches of devils who had once been angels. The Lightbringer was not among the curious, the testing, the beguiling which was Nakir's only momentary joy. He would die before he went over to the other side, but he did not fancy dying. Sara shifted and rose, sitting next to him, as restless as he was tired, worrying over him and then finally giving in to a question which had obviously bothered her for some time and which was in tone with his own haunting thoughts. "Where do angels go when they die?" she asked, as if reading his thoughts. She had heard of tact, but she simply failed to believe in it. "The Elysian Plains. Like in Greek myth?" "The same name." Not much else in common, not really, unless Nakir simply didn't know it. She hummed softly, thoughtfully. "We should go out. The air might do you good." "Not yet." "You've been lying down all day. It's not a good sign." But she didn't insist. Instead, she asked another question to mask her impatience. "What are the Elysian Plains like?" He stared at her. "How should I know?" he wanted to demand. "How should I know when I'm not dead and I've never been there?" He wanted to scream at her sometimes. But he was tired, And even if he didn't know firsthand, just like humans knew of hell, angels knew of Elysium. Like the world, like heaven and hell, infinite, different depending on the place, shifting, changing. It's a world of impulses and forgetfulness. You're stripped of everything you are and made to forget, brought down to your basic reactions, mind muddled. You gain a shape, your memories go, your identity goes. You retain reactions and what little consciousness you can keep. Can you die there? He found that a part of him resented her dispassionate tone. Sometimes he wished she was more feeling, cared more, worried more. Yes, you eventually make a mistake, and it binds you down and kills you. Then where do you go? To the material world. If I were to die here now, I would eventually be born into the world. I can't picture you as a human. It's not a given that I'd be human. Angels weren't meant to die, he thought. They were meant to be eternal lights, leading the world home. But they died anyway. Some had in the war against the Lightbringer, others in skirmishes. And most did because they slipped from their place in the world. They made mistakes and, just like him, got lost, weak, and died. He wanted to poke her and hurt her because she had dared to bring it up and then not care. Or maybe he wanted to hurt her because hell was wearing down on him. Maybe it was wearing down on her as well, making her heartless. Or maybe, the angelic, beautiful, strong, virtuous side of him thought, she doesn't worry so much because she died from the material world and ended up in hell. Dying probably changed your perspective on death. She was a strong human in hell, and getting stronger when others got weak. She wasn't a slave, nor a servant, nor one of the glass-eyed addicts falling prey to demons. It made no sense, but then again she hadn't shared much with him in the 3 months they'd roamed together. And there was something wrong about her that he'd noticed from the start, something that he hadn't cared to look into deeper. Sara poked him with a finger. We need to move. You need to move. You look bad. Perhaps we can find another spot where you won't be as affected. It doesn't work that way. Whatever. Come on. We can try. Nakir wisely shut up. He let her pull him up and help him out of the cave, where some sort of bird was roasting over a fire. He felt glad they weren't going to eat anything sentient. You eventually got used to your meal pleading for its life, but you could never come to feel comfortable with it. Close to them, Sara's horse Nil sniffed and looked bored. He was an odd beast. In a land made nearly entirely of deserts, a horse was a strange commodity, both a pleasure to behold and a perplexing sight. Very skeletal, but very spry, with an air of profound sarcasm towards the world. It was after a few days that Nakir had understood that its ribs showed under the skin like the teeth of a comb, because it wasn't a horse that belonged to the human world, but to the dark elven world, where everything was carnivorous. Its diet in hell consisted of raw incubi and succubi, freshly killed. So, a dying angel, a strange magician human woman, and a carnivorous horse met in sex hell. If it was the beginning of a joke, Nakir couldn't wait to hear the punchline. They ate. The bird tasted like nothing much, to nobody's surprise. I'm too weak to walk too long, Nakir said. I'll need to ride. Sara nodded in agreement. I was thinking of heading towards the mountains again. The water's clearer there, and we might even catch some lizards. Maybe my garden grew something. Nakir was about to say he didn't believe in her garden, when he noticed a small figure approaching from the distance, walking slowly and with a somewhat insecure footing. The one good thing about the land being so barren was that if you managed to find a good location, you could see anybody coming from miles away, which was the case now. He nudged Sara, who turned to look. Is that Margaret? She asked, surprised. What could she possibly want? Can't be good. It never was. They saved her a bit of bird meat. The other good thing about hell was that you needed to eat much less, so even the tiniest morsel could take you a long way. The figure approached slowly, stumbling through the rough land. "There's something wrong with her," Sara said. "Maybe you should help her get here, or go there and see what she wants. If I do, she'll notice you don't get up. I don't want anybody knowing you're this weak." "So you'd rather be cruel?" "It's customary here. She won't notice." Nakir forced himself not to judge her for that. Instead, he finished eating and reclined against a stone, waiting for the newcomer. She was another human, but a lost soul. The past few times they'd seen her, she had been trembling, curled up, scared and fearful. A religious girl during life, she'd made it to the hell of succubi and incubi for a reason Nakir couldn't fathom. And, like most humans, all but Sara as far as he could tell, she bent under the will of the demons. Sexual demons didn't believe in using force, since it cut down on the sexual energy they could sip from humans. They needed them willing. So human souls eventually gave in of their own volition, if you would call it that. Eventually Margaret reached them. She was a beauty, or her self-image when she died was beautiful. Long wavy hair, sparkling green eyes, tanned skin, all were somewhat shadowed by insecurity and madness now, however. "You need to go," she said without introduction. "You need to go. They say you're annoying. They say you don't have the right to live like this. You're outsiders. They say you don't really need to live, since you're not feeding them." Sara picked up the bird leg and tried to offer it. "Yeah, trust me when I say we don't want to be here either. Here, we saved you some meat." Margaret stared at the bit of food and frowned. "No, thank you. I'm not hungry." "Not hungry?" Sara asked, dubious. "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday. I got a whole fried lizard. It was big, and I ate it." "Who gave it to you?" Sara pressed. Nakir didn't need to listen to the reply to know the answer. Margaret had never been very sane, but now she looked different, her green eyes glazing with addiction, darting all over the place, unfocused. "They're not bad, you know. Not as bad as I thought. He, the first one, he gave it to me. Then we went somewhere in the house and we made love. And then another one came and we made love. And another. And then they were happy and they kissed me and they let me go. Why was I afraid of it, Sara? It was good. I want more. They said they'd feed me and there will always be more, as long as I can keep up with them. God, but I want more. I'm gonna go back now. You should leave. Or maybe you should just let them have it, Sara. It's not bad. Sex is nothing to fear." The angel lowered his eyes and let her words pass by, not listening as she went on to describe things in too much detail. He let his mind drift as he thought of heaven's gardens again, where the souls of the dead were. He thought of the places where he once lived, and of waterfalls and forests and birds and lamps and anything, really. Sara sounded encouraging in the conversation, as if sex in hell, sex in Falkirk, was ever a good idea. But he was too weak to go fully against her, and a woman mustn't see them fight. When she left, he remained sulking and silent. "She's damned, that one," Sara said eventually. Nakir didn't bother hiding his distaste. "And you didn't shake her out of it?" "Yeah, well, I could have." "And then what would we have done? Taken her with us? Tried to break her out of hell? Face it, sweetheart, we're all fucked anyway. She, at least, is enjoying it for now." He looked at her. Sometimes all that was good within him revolted against her, sickened to the marrow. There was something about her that felt wrong and cursed and damned and demonic, but he was still around her, still sleeping with her, still trailing after her. She caught his eye, saw his hatred, and smiled. There was nothing pleasant in that smile. "Come on, we need to go," she said. "You heard the woman. It's getting personal with the demons. And if she knew where we were, so did they." They'd made themselves a small shelter near the river, pushing together stones until they'd obtained what looked like a natural random heap of rocks. The shelter had a hidden opening towards a low chamber where there was just enough room for the two of them to sleep and for some supplies to be stored. It wasn't much, and it certainly wasn't home, but it was something. Sara was being human and trying to convince some plants to take root in a small stone-encircled area there. Thus far, the results were less than overwhelming, but Nakir had to admit something seemed to be growing. He also had to admit he was feeling better. It was time to get some things out of the way, demand answers of her. Sara looked up at him and he took the chance. "I really don't like you," he told her. "Something in me revolts when I look at you." She smiled, tense and unhappy. She did that, smiled at inappropriate moments. "Yeah, I've noticed. It took you a while to say it, and you've got about as much politeness as I do." Before he could answer anything, he was suddenly attacked, a flurry of limbs coming towards him viciously. He was slammed back against the mountainside and felt stones digging into his back as he tried to cry out Sara's name, but all he could do was choke and wheeze. The attacker retreated for a second, a succubus of real beauty with curled red hair and huge breasts, getting ready to skewer him with a long knife held in a well-toned hand and trembling with brutality. But before she could reach him again, a blade protruded from her abdomen, pointing up like a parody of a unicorn's horn. "You should have gone for me," Sara said from behind her. A human would have fallen from such a blow, been defeated, but demons were stronger. The succubus howled in pain and anger, and dropped its own long dagger to the ground, grabbing for Sara, who jumped away. Nakir would have joined in, but his breath was still gone, and his back still hurt from where he'd hit bare stone. Sara danced away from the other's hits and grabs. She kicked and punched, always just a step away, seeming to play rather than fight. When the succubus showed signs of finally coming down from her rush of pain and anger, Sara hit her with a blast of some sort of magic, throwing her into the river, polluting the water with demon blood. Sara followed, keeping the succubus under water until she ceased moving, then dragged her out of the water, twisted her neck for good measure, and brought the corpse to kneel for feeding. The horse looked pleased. "You're scary," Nakir told her. "You have no idea, love," she answered. "So you hate me, huh? Can't say I'm surprised." She came closer to him, pushing herself against him. The gesture made him feel as if he were dealing with a madwoman, maybe one of the demons herself, but then he realized she was doing it for a non-sexual, non-threatening reason. "Smell me." "What?" "Smell me." There was something to her, he had to admit now. A dark smell, animal, raw, and magical at the same time. It was revolting and stronger now than he usually felt it, but he realized he'd noticed it on her before, but he'd never bothered to pay attention. "This is part of why you hate me, because I am this. Because you can feel me being this and more. Can you guess what it is?" "No." "I wasn't going to tell you. I'd rather you just hated me until you figured it out on your own, if you ever did." "What are you talking about?" She growled at him, low and animal. "You are so ill that you barely notice what's going on." He stared at her. Her breath was falling on his neck, warm, agitated. He could smell that rawness on her, growing, getting stronger. It reminded him of hell, but of a different part of it, not that he knew which. He tried to guess, tried to understand why she was almost bursting with action and agitation now, but he couldn't understand it, couldn't read it on her. Her hand came on his cheek, and he thought she was slapping him. Congratulations to me, he thought, and getting abused as well. But then he realized she was turning his head away from her, making him look towards the lower parts of their mountain. At first he didn't notice, but then his eyesight focused, and he could see what it was down there that made her quite so angry. "Oh," he thought. "Oh." He was useless. Margaret hadn't been exaggerating, and they were pretty much dead. "We've been followed," Sara said, "and now the fun begins."
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.